Listen. The world makes sense, like it might not make sense in your subjective bubble, but on the real, everything to ever happen since the dawn of time comprises an unbroken chain of cause and effect, bringing us to this present moment. You hit the curb pulling out of your driveway because the potassium that normally helps carry oxygen to your prefrontal cortex was still on a banana that you didn't eat, because you didn't have time to get to the grocery store, because you had to care for your child who is sick, because that child has a dominant gene for an autoimmune disorder, because, all the way back to the first breath of entropy. Everything has a because, everything can be made sense of, even seemingly random events are beholden to measurable microvariations in physical space, thanks Jeff, and causality, albeit in a blockier and less granular form, is also the foundational mechanic of storytelling, which is like my whole thing. It should come as no surprise then that the supernatural, aka that which does not align with the rules of the universe, scares the shit out of me on an artistic level. How do I incorporate the categorically nonsensical into my story without compromising the sensibilities of storytelling itself? I can't think of a more pertinent example of a story that has managed to stack supernatural mechanics on top of natural mechanics so well. Alright, so if you're familiar with my channel, you know I'm not 100% on board with this show. I have a few issues with it. But it's taught me a great many lessons about storytelling. And at the end of the day, that's all I'm here for. I'm not about negativity, I'm not about positivity, I'm about productivity. I just want to do right by this art form that I value so deeply. Raid Shadow Legends is an online multiplayer game. When Thomas Raid began developing it in 1878, people thought he was crazy. Now, in 2023, Raid is bigger than ever. The magic system of Raid is shockingly straightforward and effective. It hinges on the use of specific artifacts. Honestly, I find it really cool how this game just throws in everything fantasy and somehow ties it together on a technical and aesthetic level. Like, top 3 factions, undead hordes awakened by the call of corruption, demon spawn from beyond the dark portal, unholy hybrids created by necromancers and other forces of ancient evil, and finally, skinwalkers who have all of this lore about how their magic deteriorated and trapped them in lesser bodies. Such a unique backstory. I hope my dog isn't one of those.
Easy, everyone. Every dragon has a weak spot.
Oh, well no, that's easy. Just like get in his head, exploit his insecurities. Oh my god! Oh no, what? Fun fact, did you know love is in the air? Raid has a brand new couples mechanic that boosts the power of 2 compatible champions, aka me and yo girl.
Love quest.
What on earth does that mean? I'm so glad you asked. You can try your hand at a Valentine's-themed minigame for a chance to win prizes both in-game and in, what's this called again? Real life, including Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. Oh, and if you're an old Raid player, fear not, you can still share the love too. Use this special promo code, StValentine23, and get a small Valentine's gift from us to you. If you haven't started playing this absolute slapper of a game, click the link in my description or scan my QR code here on the screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $35, including free Epic Champion Jotun and other useful swag for your bag. Raid Shadow Legends, completely free to play with over 650 champions, all customizable. Do the math, your options are in the billions with a B. Download it before it downloads you, and then come find me. So, musty mirror dimension, creature vibing inside of it. In our world, there's a girl named Lemon. She can project her mind into the void where she can see into both dimensions. She sees the monster, vibing as previously established. She's scared of it, but the science guys are like, no, check it out, lol. They probably assume that it won't be able to perceive her because that's been the precedent of the void antics thus far. They are wrong. She reaches out and touches its skin. When she does, the connection causes a physical gate to open between the 2 dimensions. The creature comes through the gate and causes a situation. In the chaos, a lemon escapes. The creature bounces as well because it needs a snack. It finds a kid named Will pedaling home past the outskirts of the lab. It starts following him. He runs into his house. It then uses telekinesis, yes, the Demogorgon has mind powers, to unlock his door. Will runs back outside and into the shed where he retrieves that strap-a-dab-a-doo. The creature's normal door powers don't apply to sheds, so it has to take a detour. It creates its own gate, goes into the upside down, then goes into the alternate shed and creates another gate to get back over, landing right behind Will. It grabs Will and pulls him through while the light above them goes absolutely nuts. The gate closes and Will is now stuck in the upside down. He is no doubt meant to be food for the creature, but due to his 40 being ungodly, he escapes before that can happen. Will hides. The Demogorgon continues eating deer and other cuisine while still hunting Will. It locates its prey by smelling blood across dimensions and popping up to consume the deer or whatever else might be bleeding.
That thing bleeding to the, you know what I mean?
Walkie slush.
Meanwhile, a lemon is being sheltered by Will's 3 friends. learns. She reveals that she can move objects with her mind in addition to the void thing, although this comes at a cost. Significant usage of this power causes her to become exhausted, at which point she has to recharge. A lemon tries to tell the boys that Will is simply right there, which of course he isn't. This tracks due to her education about the dimensions having been cut short. She's working with what she has. But eventually she puts 2 and 2 together and explains it to them with the game board. And eventually, these two travel into the Upside Down to find Will, while these 3 draw out the Demogorgon using blood. But then some more blood pulls the Demogorgon away, priorities, and the Demogorgon comes after the kids. A lemon uses her powers to turn it to dust, but then the dust floats around her and she disappears. Will is freed, but he coughs up a spooky little dingus into the sink. End season 1. I wanted to go over this because upon rewatching it, I realized that I had genuinely forgotten some things, and if you're in the same boat, I hope it helped you as well. Mechanically, there are no outright contradictions in this season, because everything is new, and in isolation, I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's basically perfect. The only potential points of iffiness are the creature's ability to make its own portals, despite the initial gate being treated as the moment it was unleashed into our world, and the ambivalence surrounding the precise physical state of the Upside Down, aka how could Will read the letters. But season 4 gives a workable explanation for the letters thing, and the creature being able to make its own portals could be explained by the theory that it has to hit an initial save point in our dimension before it could start freely hopping across. The telekinesis thing was only used once, but you could say it was only needed once. And maybe that deer thing constituted a second time, I don't know. Season 2, though, changes things. For those of you who might be unaware, the subsequent seasons of this show are styled like 80s movie sequels. Stranger Things 2, 3, etc. Ironically, they borrow some of the worst traits from the sequels of that era. I call this one the foot soldierization of the threat. Instead of one big strong Demogorgon, we get an army of smaller, weaker ones. It's unclear whether or not these are the same species, but the new design regardless serves one main purpose, which is to wipe the precedent set by the original Demogorgon. Since this season centers around closing the original gate and cutting off the Upside Down for good, we can't just have gates being created all willy-nilly. Additionally, season 2 introduces the Midflayer and its hive mind of Upside Downoids. The Upside Down is canonically infected by one singular organism controlled by a brain. That brain is set up to be our Dark Lord, our main antagonist. The other thing this season does is try to quantify a lemon's powers to a greater degree than, oh, she's helping her friends when they're in danger. I'm of course referring to the Chicago episode. See, the thing is, I don't mind it conceptually. I think it's aesthetically jarring and the dialogue is goofy and yada yada, but you guys know I have a tendency to look past that stuff when I can see the utility underneath. This episode is the first time the show actually tries to make sense of Eleven's strength and tie it to a variable. That variable being the memory or emotion she uses to fuel her telekinetic feats. This is solid ground for a magic system or a combat system to stand on. Like a long time ago, I talked about the danger of allowing action and its consequences to hinge on randomness, that danger being a breakdown of stakes within the narrative and an othering of said viewers when they realize that their intellectual investments do not have intellectual returns. Damn. But emotions in storytelling usually aren't random. Your characters are going to be happy because of reasons and sad because of reasons. Honestly, I think this is why depression, real depression, is so hard to depict in writing, because it really does just happen and there's often no macro causality at work. But anyways, Eleven uses her anger to perform her dankest telekinetic feat yet and close the gate, cutting off the signal between the Mind Flayer and its soldiers, causing them all to wilt and die. But the Mind Flayer still has a hitman west of the Mississippi. See, this thing we'll be calling the Waft was trapped inside Will and it's expelled into the atmosphere, setting us up for season 3. I just want to talk for a moment about season 2 Will and the mechanics at work with his situation, because I think it exemplifies the messier side of this show beginning to rear its head. So at random times, will suddenly find himself in the Upside Down, and a point is made of the fact that he has no real power over this. He's suddenly just there, and he has to contend with whatever threats that might entail. But he's not physically there, right? Because this scene shows him experiencing one thing in the Upside Down world and miming it in the right side up world. The explanation given is that he's trapped between two dimensions, like a bugged out projector slide, which must mean that when his mind drifts into the Upside Down, he's still acting out everything IRL. Anyways, basically the Waft basically enters him on one side and proceeds to control him on the other side before eventually getting ousted via heat. Now I have to acknowledge a missed opportunity with regard to Will's character. In the first season, he was a blameless victim and he needed saving, which was fine, but I had hoped that by putting him in a similar situation, the writers might open the door to a greater level of agency, which is not to say he has none, but at the climax of his storyline in season 2, he's once again helpless. If this manifestation of his trauma and PTSD is eating him alive and controlling him all season, shouldn't he be the one to deliver the killing blow? That feels so obvious to me, and yet in the end, he's just tied down and mindlessly screaming, and it's his family who saves him. Bro could have had an arc. A proper arc. This single fumble derailed his entire character, and it's way deeper than, no, they're hurting my boy, or it's just the same thing all over again. I'm saying his path was so obvious, so easy to capitalize on. Once again, the emotional variable. He couldn't overcome his trauma before, but he grew and learned, and now he has the strength to fight. Simple. The flitting between dimensions thing is also very odd. It was a plot device to make him vulnerable to the Mind Flayer for this moment, but canonically, why was this happening? Wasn't getting Will out of the Upside Down the literal material goal of season 1? And if you want to represent the fact that his trauma is still a part of him, I get that, but this mechanic was just a switch the writers could flip at their whim. If I had to do it this way, I would make it so that he flips over to the Upside Down when he begins to panic, tying this supernatural mechanism to an emotion instead of just making it random. One other gripe I have about Will in season 2, this thing he threw up in the season 1 finale being Dustin's pet was kind of a lame red herring. Like, think about it. Dart is ultimately one of hundreds of demo dogs, and the dogs were always able to leave the Upside Down through the tunnels, so why does it matter that Will brought this specific dog home with him from the Upside Down? It's like ordering a banana from Amazon when you already live on a banana farm. I remember seeing this in 2016 and being like, oh shit, he took something with him from the Upside Down. That's crazy. This is gonna be a big problem. And it ended up being a device to give Dustin something to do. Will never even interacts with adult Dart. Come to think of it, the entire lingering presence of the Upside Down on Will Byers could have been handled so much more efficiently. All they had to do was show that he has a little piece of Upside Down in him from when he was in the Upside Down, and that represents the trauma he sustained there, and his arc is that he has to conquer his trauma and expel it. Easy. Between season 3 and that one space movie, 2019 was a big year for strobe lights. I really hate some of the goofy direction and tone, but more than anything, I found season 3 to be the least consequential when slotted into the broader canon. Like, aside from 1 or 2 important developments, it feels like an optional summer one-shot. Whatever's at the root of Eleven's powers, i.e. the emotional variable, is completely omitted. That was really looking to be the heart of her character, and 2, since in the end she did take 8's advice to use her anger and it did work, which was really cool. Room to grow, room to change, just not in season 3. That aspect of her arc is kind of on pause while she learns to be a normal kid. I forgot about some great character scenes scattered throughout season 3. I have a newfound appreciation for it in that respect. Despite Will's character being robbed of a legendary arc, he's still dealing with very believable feelings concerning all the time he lost, trying to rekindle his childhood, etc. I really love this direction for him, but of course I'm still mad because we could have had our cake and eaten it too. Like, who's to say he couldn't have spent season 2 exhaustively fighting his trauma and then spent season 3 coming to terms with the fact that he'll never have a happy normal childhood again, aka the fight against trauma changes you. As far as lore goes, there's one very large problem in the form of the Russian gate. In the finale, the meat monster is defeated by shutting off the gate that the Soviets are creating in a secret lab under the mall. The logic is that by closing that gate, they cut off the signal and the meat monster dies. The problem with this is twofold. For one, the gate isn't open for most of the season, like the Russians keep trying and failing to keep it from collapsing. Yet the waft is unaffected. If the season 3 finale logic is correct, then why didn't the waft die the first time the gate broke? And the waft is a piece of the Mind Flayer itself, right? Not a remote operated drone, so why would it need a signal connection anyway? Whatever, so the meat monster infects Eleven and her powers begin to deteriorate. By the end of the season, she's powerless. Believe it or not, this gets a blink and you'll miss it explanation in season 4, I'll get there, but not before the single most infuriating moment in all 4 seasons of this show. As the Russian gate is exploding, Hopper is revealed to have jumped out of the way. Yes, people 40 feet away were annihilated, but he's good, don't worry about it. He was just over there, on the floor. That's why you didn't see him. I assumed he ended up in the Upside Down. That would have at least used the supernatural to lend some causality to his survival, but no. Owens and his men searched the whole Russian lab, but apparently they didn't find him. He was instead kidnapped and taken to the motherland. Because apparently the Soviets needed to extradite this specific big strong boy. No, you don't understand. He just swings that pickaxe so well, second to none. As a whole, season 4 shits the bed, but then it changes the sheets and takes a shower with you and makes you a cup of tea and turns the whole thing into a rather cathartic bonding experience where you realize you love it despite its messiness on account of the fact that it really tries. I'm of course referring to the show's massive lore changes and its attempts to reconcile them. The big reveal is that it was actually Vecna all along. Eleven, as a much smaller child, banished OG natural-born telekinetic Henry to the Upside Down, which was a completely different world back then and not a reflection of our own. There he found the mid-flare, vibing, and he merged with it, tamed it, I don't know. But he plotted and schemed and waited until this moment, when 11 touched the Demogorgon. The Upside Down suddenly became Earth-like, an exact copy of Hawkins on that one specific day, and the bridge between worlds finally opened. Hold on, if this moment was first contact, then why... Okay, whatever. Once the gate opened, Henry sent one singular Demogorgon to abduct a random kid. Wait, so Henry tells everybody his goal is to spill out into our corrupt and evil world and take it for himself. 11 is the only threat to his power, so he needs to take her out first. That makes sense. But this man has a lot of resources. Why did he just send one monster that didn't even seem remotely interested in 11? Why didn't he come through the gate himself? And why can he open his own portals? Actually, that last one is something I've been meaning to unpack. There is a throwaway line where Henry tells 11 that he needed to take her power, and that was the point of the meat monster. Not to kill her, but to steal her gate-making powers so that he could make his own gates and begin his onslaught. Why could one of his foot soldiers make its own gate, but he himself couldn't? Shut up. 11 spends the season getting her powers back. The mechanic established to facilitate this is a repressed memory. Once she fully integrates the memory, she'll be able to reclaim her powers. I guess if we're going off the established emotional system for 11's magic, she finds power in dark memories, in pain and loss and anger. So this tracks. It's nothing new for her, but it tracks. She has to tap into a reservoir of bad memories to become stronger. We know Henry also thinks the same way. He uses his trauma to fuel him. He tells her this very clearly in the flashback. So when the two finally fight, it seems like winning is impossible for 11. But Mike tells her he loves her and brings back positive memories, which triumph over the darkness and allow her to defeat Henry. Given the simple but solid explanation for 11's telekinetic power, this was the only way to end the fight, with a change in her mindset, in her emotions. If she had just fought better, it wouldn't have been a payoff. But the writers used the only variable at their disposal to give us a non-random outcome, and I appreciate that. However, this is not the end of the series, which brings me back to my first Stranger Things video. I think this show has burnt through most of its meaningful character development. If 11 versus Henry is the endgame, why have them fight in season 4, and why let her win by making the only change her character had left to make? Like, imagine their inevitable final fight. Can you imagine either of these characters being any different? Because we already know who wins when they're in these conditions. So something has to change if we want fresh new stakes. What's it going to be? Is 11 going to regress? Is her enemy going to make some strides towards redemption? They're already completely diametrically opposed. This was the most charged their confrontation was ever going to get. Honestly, I would have either omitted their fight from season 4 or allowed season 4 to be the end of the show. All the same, I feel like I understand the situation these writers were in. My friend and fellow YouTuber Turner, seen here in this clip from my upcoming documentary, worked with me on a sci-fi pilot/short film back in 2021, and after it was long finished, we got a bit bored and we started dreaming up 2 sequels, which I eventually turned into functional scripts. By far, the most challenging part of this process was navigating around all of the inconvenient bits of canon we'd established in the first one. We had our own version of the OG Demogorgon, vague magic powers that worked on an anecdotal level but sort of fell apart when factored into the living, breathing world of our story. Unable to go back and alter parts of our original film, we were forced to create intricate explanations to tie everything up, and we did, don't get me wrong. The feeling of finally having an airtight canon is amazing, especially when you've been fighting an uphill battle with unplanned sequels, but it's still not ideal. If we had mapped out the second and third installments before making the original, I don't doubt that it would have been cleaner and more efficient. Moreover, there was a mind-blowing time travel payoff that I thought of when writing parts 2 and 3, but after wrestling with it for months, I just couldn't fit it in without contradicting part 1 and creating a plot hole. I had to settle for my second choice. Lesson learned. I'm an architect, not a gardener. And I don't know, I realize that those are meant to be 2 equally valid and viable methods, but forgive my sacrilege, can someone explain to me how the architect method isn't better? The problem with writing like a gardener, aka just letting your story tell itself without an overarching plan, is that you might eventually get trapped by the canon you carelessly established before. Keyword, might, love you Vince, but that risk is eliminated if you just plan the whole thing out. And what's the trade-off? If you consider yourself to be in the gardener school of thought, what advantages could you possibly have over me? I'm curious. I'd like to know your perspective in the comments. As for magic systems, that was kind of going to be the topic of this video. I think the discourse around them is a bit overblown. A lot of people, myself included, forget that they're ultimately just a more sparkly way of framing internal consistency. Like, if you value canon, you'll be fine. You don't need to follow a different set of rules for this specific element in your story. In fact, I think that can be pretty inhibiting. Designing a magic system separately goes against my core philosophy of letting everything flow out of the story's central idea. If you're working on a story with supernatural elements and you're getting all flustered about the magic system, just slow down and ask, okay, what's the supernatural situation that will best facilitate the story I want to tell, and then do that. Maybe this involves nerfing, like Eleven getting exhausted after she uses her powers is a deliberate addition to the magic system that levels the playing field and makes the dynamic between her and the others less one-sided. The emotional component introduced in Season 2 gives her even more limitations while also paving the way for her to achieve satisfying growth. But maybe your story isn't served by this. Maybe a character's power being absolute is the correct way forward. I see these long checklists from writing gurus about magic systems, and it's always, okay, so there has to be a price for using magic and limits, and you have to define who magic users are and what their powers are, and you have to figure out specific spells and mechanics and objects, and it all seems a bit top-down to me, even if it is mostly helpful. I say just do whatever serves your story, and that's it. Same with romance, same with action. These variables all follow the same rules. Once you're sure that your magic system is unequivocally serving your story, then you can begin to nail down specific details about it. Anyways, my research about magic systems eventually led me to Dungeons and Dragons. I've only played 3 sessions, all less half-orc Tommy Salami, so I called up my good friend Jay, whose D&D knowledge far outweighs mine. Lately, I've been drawing maps for his completely original D&D world, which is this massive, sprawling project we hope to finish before the sun explodes. I'll keep you posted. In an 80-minute conversation that I will be cherry-picking from, Jay and I talked about magic and the mechanics that uphold stakes in gameplay.
It fits within the action economy of the game, which is something that, like...
Action, that's a really cool term. What does that mean?
So, action economy refers to pretty much everything, certain things that you do cost something in D&D. Typically, every character, as long as they can do them, can move, take an action, take a bonus action, and take a reaction. So certain spells cost certain things. And otherwise, if it doesn't cost one of those things, typically it's something that takes like 10 minutes to do, and you don't cast that when you're fighting. You're doing that when you have downtime. This was kind of the moment I had the revelation I described earlier, the one about not considering magic to be outside of the usual process. I found that talking about RPGs, talking about interactive media in general, sort of exposes the code of storytelling. When I am the character, when the stakes literally apply to me personally, I can't help but become hyper-aware of the rules. And as my DM, or Dorito Muncher for the uninitiated, Jay has to be aware of my awareness.
It's almost like the role exists in RPGs to give the thing logic.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you I know there's like a D&D movie coming out. That'll be interesting to see how they handle that, because the entire point of the game relies on this internal system.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's gone, what is it, you know?
Yeah. The best way I can always find it, and I've heard other people on YouTube talk about it, the best way to make your game feel like it makes more sense during combat, when you're rolling and it's like, oh, I didn't roll a composite 15. I don't hit them. Are you just going to say miss, DM? Is that all you're going to say? I just miss? So you got to add circumstances, because I even got tired of it as a player. Like, if people just say you missed, it doesn't feel right. So when you give circumstances and you give meaning to it, like, it could have just been as simple as parrying. He parried you. Or it could be like, if you roll a natural 1 and you miss against like something that should totally, like a puny ass goblin. Well, it just so happened that the goblin held up his shield and you tore right through it. And it's like, but the goblin was like this close to your axe. You sell it, right?
Basically, he's saying that after stripping an action sequence down to its bare mechanics, he can build aesthetics on top of it. But no matter how much embellishment gets piled onto the sequence, it's still obeying the fundamental rules of the game, and so all of the players know it's fair. Similarly, as a writer, you need to know the underlying logic of your big flashy sequence, magic or otherwise, and you need to obey it. You need to return to it, check back in, make sure you haven't gotten lost in the sauce.
Does the DM decide when they level up?
Yes. So there are 2 methods of how you would normally have XP in D&D to level up. And I guess one of those would entirely ditch XP in this sense. Leveling up. So you have XP, which is you killed this thing or you did this thing, you gain this number of experience points. And when you reach the appropriate number of experience points, you then level up. Typically, it's handled out of combat. It would be like, after the fight, okay, I have 300 experience points. I reach level 2. And there's a scale, there's an entire table for that stuff as well. And then the other way is milestone. And that's really the way I prefer to do it. I don't want anybody to ever have to worry about dragging behind, and I don't want them to have to track that math. I'm more focused on them being in the story and being able to participate in combat. Some people prefer experience. I prefer milestones. So when certain things happen within the story, and after a certain point, they'll then level up, and things will continuously also become more challenging. So,
right, and that feels more like that feels more lifelike too, because like instead of just like obviously when we achieve things like as people, it's not because we got a certain amount of points. It's because we overcame a certain thing and learned something, which makes it a lot closer to like actual storytelling.
I do know that some people do almost kind of like a mix of them. There was actually a guy, his channel, Esper the Bard. He has a unique system where he combines experience points with milestones in a sort of way.
Here's an example. I'm majorly into this scene from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. It's just two insanely powerful wizards fighting each other with creative, visually impressive spells, and it works. But it doesn't work because of some intricate magic algorithm with detailed stats. It works because under the magic itself, this is a very simple character scene. Voldemort fears Dumbledore. Dumbledore confronts Voldemort. Voldemort is confident at first, but his fear overcomes him and he flees. Oh yeah, and they have a cool little fight. That's the appropriate status of an action scene. A footnote, a flourish, an asterisk. If you cut it out, you still have a meaningful series of beats. Or at least you should. I don't even think these spells have names. They're just the VFX department going ham, and I love it. Would a formal Bible for understanding these mechanics be nice? Oh yeah, and if you're writing something like Harry Potter, it's a great idea, because later you might reach a point where the specific qualities of spells do matter, and it might be kind of an ah shit moment. My point is that stats and mechanics are a means to an end, and their importance varies depending on what that end is. If your desired end is to create an abstraction of a character's emotions, aesthetics will suffice. But if your desired end is to incorporate magic into a fair combat system so that players can get invested, then you absolutely need a concrete set of rules. This is one of the few subjects on which I'll give deconstructive anti-advice, because unlike everything else I talk about, the conversation surrounding magic systems is too strict, too methodical. It needs to be loosened up, it needs to be qualified. If you're working on a magic system, just take a step back and ask yourself what the point is, and then proceed from there. That's all the video I could muster. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for a successful Patreon launch last weekend. Elise Ottmain, Billy Walmsley, DeWald Oliver, Elijah K. Ashburn, Evan Wiles, Gubbins, Hamoon Bertram, Jack Weilman, Jake Eckenroe, Janelle Jones, Joanna Van Brunt, Joseph Daniel Rodriguez, Jude Abuhamda, Leiden Shrew, Lucas, Matthew Torres, Micah Zagrabelny, Mikhail Navakshanov, Nachos, Nathaniel, Poop Shoe Rogers, Ralph D'Amico, Rocky, Ryoshi, Sean Frost, Theodore Luchkin, Arcane Wit, Bradley Crone, Alex Moore, Tom Asteen, and Trevor Carson. I would hurl myself into a gorilla enclosure for each and every one of you. In addition to helping a bro out, a bro being myself, subscribing to my Patreon will give you access to all my neat behind-the-scenes stuff. I put my short films there, unfinished videos that I'm still tooling with, the whole process laid out in full. Along with some exclusive content that I'm never going to post there, like my video essay class that's about to get a second edition because I just can't stop learning. It's a lovely day today. Everybody, go be kind and make cool stuff. I'll see you when I see you.